area of low pressure that's been winding itself up overnight. Not arriving just yet, however. A couple of weak weather fronts still sitting over the UK. They are fizzling out, but leaving a lot of cloud. Some sunny spells over northeast England, northeast Scotland, and at times it'll brighten up across the south. But equally, one or two light showers possible over southwest England, Wales, maybe southwest Scotland, and increasingly cloudy and windy across Northern Ireland with some rain creeping in here. But it is, again, pretty mild. Temperatures double digits for the vast majority, and where we see some brightness across the south, temperatures could get up to 15 Celsius. But here comes that low pressure system, a spell of rain crossing Northern Ireland, then spreading into Scotland and through this evening into parts of West and North Wales and Northwest England, also turning blustery with further outbreaks of rain. But for much of the south and east of England, it will stay dry. Temperatures could temporarily drop down to single figures, but for most, it will be quite a mild start to Friday because of the wind. A blustery day then. Not much rain across East Anglia and the southeast, but quite a soggy morning for Scotland, parts of northwest England, and the rain will steadily spread across much of Wales and northeast England too. Showers across the south are possible, and some showers will continue for Northern Ireland. It will be a blustery day, even though, again, temperatures on the mild side, not feeling all that mild because of the gusty winds. Further rain to come through the evening across parts of central and southern Scotland. Still a few showers elsewhere, but generally things are turning drier. The rain is likely to persist, however, across Shetland into Saturday. Into the weekend, though, things are calming down once more as things start to turn drier. The winds will ease, but most will stay fairly cloudy. Goodbye.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM. I'm Darren McCaffrey. Over the next hour, we'll bring you the latest as that stream of migrants across the English Channel continues. We'll also be live in Glasgow as COP enters the last few days of negotiations. Can a deal be done? And vaccine mandates come into effect from today for care home staff. It could mean 50,000 losing their job. Was it a good idea? We'll be debating that. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date at 3 o'clock. Millions of people have observed a 2-minute silence today to remember the men and women who've lost their lives in conflict. Marked each year on the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month, People across the UK paused to honour those who made the ultimate sacrifice. The Duchess of Cornwall joined hundreds of veterans at Westminster Abbey. Armistice Day commemorates the end of the First World War. Services will also be held on Remembrance Sunday. Border Force officials have now intercepted at least 25 migrant boats attempting to cross the Channel today, each of them carrying up to 50 people. It's been reported that 4 small boats have also made it to shore, landing on Deal beaches in Kent. There's been a real influx of migrants trying to reach the UK in recent days, with 1,200 crossing the English Channel in the past 48 hours. Tens of thousands of care home staff in England are facing job losses as COVID vaccinations for them become a legal requirement from today. Staff must be double jabbed to work unless they're medically exempt. It's estimated more than 50,000 current care home workers have not received both doses, although nearly half have had a single jab. Well, the move comes as the sector faces severe staff shortages, with some quitting in advance because of the new policy. Speaking to GB News, Alex Norris, Shadow Minister for Public Health and Patient Safety, said Labour had warned the government not to make this move.
We said to the government we didn't think this was a wise thing to do. We encouraged the government to use the time, because this was voted on a number of months ago before the summer, to use the time to engage with trade unions, to engage with professional bodies. They haven't done that, and I'm really worried about the impact that that's going to have on social care and then again on the NHS. But once again, it shows at the very heart of government a lack of strategic planning here, understanding of the real world, and it's all our communities that are going to suffer from that.
The NHS is on its knees and buckling under pressure, according to industry analysts, as waiting lists in England reach a record high. The chief executive of the NHS Confederation says the current situation is unsustainable and patient care is being compromised. While the King's Fund Health think tank said that chronic workforce shortages were heaping pressure on overstretched staff. Data from NHS England shows 5.8 million people were on waiting lists at the end of September. That's the highest number since records began. Cold and flu capsules are being recalled by 11 UK retailers because of a mistake on the packaging. Perrigo tablets sold by outlets like Boots, Tesco and Morrison's overstated the safe maximum daily dose for children. The medicines regulator, which issued the recall, says the risk to consumers is low. A funeral's been held in Northern Ireland for the veteran Dennis Hutchings. The funeral, was in Plymouth. Hundreds of mourners lined a road, applauding, cheering and saluting as a coffin arrived at the church, escorted by bikers. The 80-year-old died from COVID last month. He was awaiting trial over a shooting in County Tyrone during the Troubles in 1974. Rotherham Council have introduced new plans to combat child sexual exploitation. It follows criticism from opposition Conservatives who said not enough was being done to tackle child grooming in the borough, which the council and South Yorkshire Police dispute. The 2014 J report revealed that 1,500 children had been abused in the town between 1997 and 2013. One survivor that we're calling Elizabeth was among them. Well, she told us what she thought of the council's new plan.
Hoping that there's improvements, and there will be, but because they've been amended, I feel like they've been watered down a little bit more. I hope that Rotherham can make a stand, and I hope Rotherham can heal. Am I 100% sure that's going to happen? No.
The former president of South Africa, Frederick Wilhelm de Klerk, has died at the age of 85. The politician oversaw the end of the apartheid era and shared the Nobel Peace Prize with Nelson Mandela. He's said to have died peacefully in his home in Cape Town. Water companies in England and Wales could be forced to hand back more than £67 million next year by the industry regulator. Companies like Thames Water failed to meet targets set by Ofwat, which encourages them to invest in customer service. The payments will be deducted from bills in the next financial year and will save customers around £3.50 each. Steven Gerrard says Aston Villa's ambitious plans were a factor in him agreeing to become the club's new head coach. The former Liverpool and England captain, who left Rangers, who he guided to the Scottish Premiership title undefeated last season. Gerrard replaces Dean Smith, who was sacked by Villa on Sunday. A new species of dinosaur with an unusually large nose has been identified by a retired GP on the Isle of Wight. Jeremy Lockwood spent years rummaging through old bones when he reconstructed a skull which had been in storage since 1978. Well, he discovered the unique bulbous nasal bone. The PhD student says the discovery made it one of the happiest days of lockdown. You are up to date. We'll keep doing so on GB News. But now back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Thank you, Rosie, and welcome to you at home to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I am Darren McCaffrey, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. We're going to be bringing you the latest on what's happening with migration on the English Channel. We know that more than 1,200 have crossed from France in pretty awful conditions, must be said, in the last 24 hours or so. Our very own Mark White is in Dover with the latest. Also, as of today, it is illegal to work in a care home if you haven't had 2 vaccines on the front line. How many workers could lose their jobs? And could there be a staffing crisis in the sector? We'll be finding out. And it's Housing Day at COP26 on the penultimate day. We'll be live in Glasgow and speak to those trying to make our homes green whilst tackling the housing crisis. But can it be done? Can you do both? As always, we want to hear what you've got to say on many of the day's big political stories. Do email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or indeed tweet me at gbnews. Good afternoon and welcome to the programme. Yeah, indeed, and we're also today going to be looking at what is on the front page, or on the front page of the Telegraph newspaper today, which is this report about a Labour MP and 2 SNP MPs who were on a flight to Gibraltar a couple of days ago and seemed to have more than a couple of drinks on that plane, according to some. They were heavily drunk. And Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is now going to complain to the leaders of Labour and the SNP about the behaviour of those MPs on that plane. According to one report, one of the SNP MPs required a wheelchair. So inebriated was he to take him from the baggage reclaim area to the military bus. They were on an official flight to Gibraltar to look at what the British military do there. And as I say, many were kind of slightly offended by this. They thought it might well risk undermining the respect for Parliament, and that's why Ben Wallace has intervened. What do you think? Is this a story you care about? Should MPs be allowed to knock some gin and tonics back on a plane, but without necessarily the publicity? Or is it pretty awful that actually on the week of Remembrance Day that these MPs on an official visit to look at the work of the armed forces did seem to go over the top? Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or indeed tweet us. But first, let's start with our top story, and that is that tens of thousands of carers who have not had both of their coronavirus vaccine doses are now unable to legally work in care homes after the government's mandatory jab policy kicked in today. Official figures due out this afternoon are expected to show that more than 50,000 current staff in care homes for younger and older residents have not been recorded as having received both of the doses as of November 7th, 4 days before the deadline. Care homes have said that they, in some cases, have been the unwitting guinea pigs through this implementation policy. That's according to the National Care Forum, warning of a difficult long winter ahead, and the consequences for the sector could be pretty stark. A snap poll of 131 care home managers conducted by the Institute of Health and Social Care Management shows that almost 80% of bosses expect to lose staff in some form. Some homes might have to close, and extra deaths are expected due to those staffing issues. Well, I'm joined now by Guy Collis. He's the policy officer at Unison, the trade union who specialises in care homes, and indeed, obviously, lots of care home staff members are member of Unison. Good afternoon to you, Guy. Just first of all, where does Unison stand on this policy?
I think it's sort of important to say from the outset that we've always supported the vaccine. We've always encouraged our members to have this. It's very much the way out of the pandemic. However, we've been warning from the start, along with many of those care providers that you've already mentioned, that this policy could be really counterproductive, that more harm was likely to come from it than good. The sector already has a major staffing crisis, as many as 100,000 vacancies. So the last thing it can really take at the moment is the loss of further staff.
That may well be true. That's a long-term issue. In the short term, we're going into a winter in which coronavirus is still around. Rates are very high. We're told that some vaccines are waning. Surely protecting the most vulnerable and elderly parts of our population has to be the priority.
We agree that the vaccine is really important, and we have encouraged all our members to have the jab if they can. I think that the key thing with this, though, is to note the difference that some of the other countries have taken. So Wales and Scotland, for instance, have taken a much more persuasive approach, less coercive, and actually, as a result, they've achieved a higher uptake of the vaccine. So I think that the kind of heavy-handed approach that the government in England has taken to this has actually proved counterproductive. There's much academic research out there which shows that, particularly for workers who are reticent about having the jab, this kind of coercive approach is actually likely to make them harden in their stance.
Interesting how you're approaching this, Guy. You're approaching this from essentially, well, maybe it's understandably so, of course, about your employees, also the employees of care homes or your members, what they may want. Most people looking at this may well think, well, frankly, I don't really care what they want. I want to protect some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And that's the number one priority. It's not about whether you convince people to take the jab or not. Clearly, as you've admitted, it is in the public interest and the public health interest that these employees have taken the jab to protect those vulnerable people. And the priority should be the vulnerable people and not really caring about whether people have got issues with taking jabs or not.
The priority certainly should be the vulnerable people, the elderly and disabled who are in care homes, which is why, as I've said, we have always supported the use of the vaccine. I think that the worry here, though, is that the government is going to replace one problem with another. We've heard already from many of the care providers that they expect, due to the staffing shortages, not entirely due to this policy, but certainly exacerbated by it, that they may end up having to close their homes. And that is going to cause a huge amount of anxiety and upset for those care home residents and their families. So the two things are very clearly linked here. There was an alternative to this approach, and it's a shame that the government haven't adopted that way of doing things.
Guy, appreciate your thoughts as always. Guy Collis there from Unison, the union. Let's move on and speak to the Labour MP, Graham Stringer, who joins me down the line. Graham, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you were listening into that discussion. What are your thoughts on this policy being implemented today?
I agree with the trade union rep that persuasion is better than force, but whichever way you go, I think you have to get to a situation where people working in care homes and frontline staff in the NHS are vaccinated, because the primary issue is looking after vulnerable people, whether they're patients or whether they're people living in care homes. You do not want staff going in there, infecting them, and then they die, sadly, in many cases. So I think that's where we've got to get to. The government could have started earlier. It could have been clearer in its methodology of how it was going to get there. I'm strongly in favour, eventually, whether it's persuasion or force, contractual force, professional obligations, whatever you want to call it. I'm strongly in favour that people shouldn't be working in care homes if there is the potential of them infecting people, when they could have reduced that infection possibility. But I actually voted against the government's proposals first time round because they were so unclear about what they wanted to do. They couldn't answer simple questions about whether it would apply to entertainers going into care homes or hairdressers. Hairdressers get just as close to people living in care homes as many of the staff do.
Which is a fair point and well raised. I suppose the kind of counter-argument about why do it now is that, these vaccines have been around for essentially a year. Many people have been offered them, 6, 8, 7, 9 months ago. I mean, if you haven't convinced them by now, I don't think you're necessarily going to convince them. and we're going into a really difficult winter period in which the risks are even greater.
The risks, if you get vaccinated against COVID, your chances of passing on the disease, if you get infected, drop by about 50%. It's not 100%. Nothing will give you 100% protection against passing it on. But if that's half of the people in a care home infected, then that's very important indeed. There is evidence that once the policy has been announced, and I'm not just talking about in this country, but in France and other countries, staff say, well, I'm going to get it now. I didn't really want to get it for whatever reason, but I will get it. But also in timing, the government has avoided this issue in care homes for some time. Maybe 4.5 years ago, the Science and Technology Committee took an overall look at influenza and vaccination against flu, and we were surprised, and I would say shocked, that at that time only 20% of staff in care homes were vaccinated against flu. Now, flu is a bigger killer, in some ways a worse killer than COVID, and we made a recommendation that it should be a professional qualification, not to do it straight away and sack people, but to introduce it as a professional qualification. If you're working in care, you should get a flu vaccination. And that was not followed up by the government. It's a difficult issue, but people's lives are at stake. And certainly as far as flu and general policy on vaccination, the government should have acted much earlier, and they can't say that they weren't warned about this as a problem.
Graham, thank you for that. And as I say, I'm sure there are people who've got diversion views at home. Always really interesting to hear what you've got to say. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Please do email me and we'll read some of those out at the end of the programme. Just while we've got you, just two other issues I quickly want to touch upon. First of all, the Chancellor today saying that he reckons the government can do better amidst those sleaze allegations that we've seen. What do you make of what do you think about the second jobs stuff? I mean, do you think MPs shouldn't have second jobs?
It's a complicated issue. The simple answer is it's not whether they should or whether they should be allowed to. And I think they should be allowed to. Obviously, I think it's a good thing as part of our democracy that ministers are members of parliament. That's not the same in every country. That's a second job, and there's time for it. There are unpaid second jobs and there are paid jobs. I think there's what's happening around this. People are appalled by the large amounts of money being earned, but the issue really is about whether the person is doing their job as a member of parliament representing their electorate. Transparency is the most important thing, so that the electorate can make up their mind whether they want it or not a blanket ban. People, as soon as you say nurses and doctors, which are dentists, they should have a second job. Then you say if somebody's running a small business with their family, should they be able to serve in the shop when they get back? And before long, you have so many rules and regulations, it's not worth doing. I think transparency and letting the electorate make their mind up about whether their member of parliament is representing them or not. The one hard line is it's been a long time that there's been a long time rule against paid advocacy, and that obviously has to remain.
OK, Graham, thank you very much for your thoughts on both those subjects. Graham Stringer, the Labour MP, joining us down the line from Manchester. Well, let's go now actually to Dover, because 1,200 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats in the last 48 hours. And Mark White, our Home Affairs editor, is there in Dover. It is November, Mark. We talked about this yesterday. Migrants continue to make that perilous journey, even in the depths of autumn.
Yes, indeed. Impeccable timing as always, because you join us just as another Border Force vessel comes into Dover Harbour. This is the cutter Seeker. I'm just going to get out of the way. You can see it just behind that crane there. The Seeker, one of the bigger Border Force vessels. Two of them have been out today. The Seeker and Valiant, which has just gone back out once again, actually heading down towards Dungeness. It has been a phenomenally busy day, out in the English Channel. We are being told by sources now that we may well have topped and exceeded the record for a single day arrival of migrants. That was, of course, set last Wednesday. 853 migrants arrived across the English Channel in one day. It is looking like it may well have surpassed that number today. At last count, 25 small boats were being intercepted or had been intercepted during the course of the morning and into the early afternoon. Well, those incidents are still ongoing in the Channel at the moment, and it's not just involving these border force vessels that you see here. There are lifeboats involved as well, 6 at last count. Dover lifeboat has been out on back-to-back calls. Dungeness lifeboat, the Rye lifeboat, the Hastings lifeboat, the East Sussex lifeboat in Eastbourne has been out. It has been a very busy day, like so many days for these lifeboat crews. And they are, remember, of course, Darren, volunteers. They hold down usually another job of work, but they have to come out and do this as well. And when it involves taking a whole day off work, sometimes multiple days in a row, you have to have a pretty understanding employer to put up with that on a long-term basis. We're just going to show you, Darren, actually down here on the water by the harbour, you can see some of the small boats, the crafts that they've been coming across the Channel on. Now, these are much bigger than the small boats that we were seeing even just a few months ago, which were about a third of the size of these. These are 11 and 9 metre inflatable boats. The people traffickers are getting more sophisticated. They know that they can pack more people on these bigger boats, and that's what they've been doing today. Some 40, 50, even 60 migrants apiece on these boats coming over. It's more dangerous, and of course, if anything happens, more potential lives could be lost. We've already seen incidents where migrants have died over the last couple of weeks, 5 confirmed fatalities, and actually more missing at sea, presumed dead. What we haven't seen, and what the UK and French authorities have been warning about, is the potential for a very significant tragedy out in the English Channel, with perhaps a very heavy loss of life. As we get into the winter months now, Darren, that is the real concern, because unlike previous years, they are continuing to come across even when the weather conditions are not ideal. Not that they ever really are ideal in the Channel, where the wind can whip up at a moment's notice and the tides are always fast flowing. And of course, the waves and the wake from the many vessels in this busy shipping lane is another obstacle that these small boats have to try to overcome.
And Mark, what I kind of asked you yesterday a little bit, which is, you know, this is very, very unusual, isn't it, for November? We expect these numbers potentially in the summer, as you say, when the weather is more likely to be good for crossing the Channel. It is very, very unusual.
Yes, it is, and it is the real concern, because it's just about manageable in the summer, when it can be pretty calm in the Channel on good days in the summer, and you get them coming across in significant numbers. But to be setting records as we head into the winter months is of great concern. We're going to just give you a bit more of a look at the vessel there now. What is happening is they wait, because we just before this vessel Seeker came in, we've got another vessel, Hunter, nearby. We had the lifeboat in and the other cutter, Valiant, which is on its way to Dungeness now, all in, and they've offloaded dozens of migrants who are being processed in a makeshift processing centre just about 20-30 metres from here. That processing centre is full. They have to deal with them before they can take these migrants off the boat here and then take them up the gangway to the processing centre. So they may be cold and a bit miserable, but at least from their point of view, it's job done. They've reached Britain. They will enter the asylum system now, as 99% of those who do. And of course, many of them will be from Syria or Iran, countries where it is likely that they will be granted asylum. But that's not all of them at all. There are many people here from countries in Africa that are not considered to be war-torn countries where they would be automatically granted asylum. And we just saw coming up the gangway just a few minutes before you came to us about a dozen or more people from Vietnam. Now, many people go on their holidays to Vietnam. It's certainly not a war-torn country, impoverished, of course, in parts of that country, but these people, for sure, are economic migrants. They'll be processed, though. They'll be entered into the asylum system, and it could be many months before they are returned to their country of origin.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. Mark White there, our Home Affairs editor. And we're going to be returning to you, hopefully, Mark, before the end of the programme for an update as those boats continue to flow in. We're going to take a quick break here on the briefing on GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be reflecting on Remembrance Day and hearing from the Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford. That's in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Hello again. After a fairly calm day of weather today, things are going to get lively overnight. A gusty, blustery day on Friday, with most places seeing a fair few showers. There will be some spots that see some sunny spells, but here's the reason why things are getting lively. A deep area of low pressure is heading our way. Not quite here yet, certainly across much of England, Wales and Scotland, but rain is pushing into western Scotland and already into parts of Northern Ireland. That rain will spread more widely into northwest England, West Wales through the night. Much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England will stay dry, but everywhere the breeze will pick up. That'll keep the temperatures up. Early on, we could drop down to 7 or 8 Celsius across the east, but by dawn, most towns and cities will be up at double digits. So not a cold start to Friday, but for some a fairly grim start. Rain across Northern Ireland, quite heavy bursts of rain crossing through Scotland as well, and fairly damp over parts of northwest England and North Wales. Then we'll see showers developing almost anywhere through the day, staying particularly dull and damp through central Scotland and across the Northern Isles too. Won't see too many showers across East Anglia and the southeast, and a bit of brightness here. Could see highs of 15 Celsius, but don't forget it will be quite blustery, so feeling cooler perhaps than those temperatures would suggest. Through the course of Friday evening, the rain actually tends to fizzle out, so many places become dry, and slowly the breeze will start to ease also. So Saturday's a calmer day, still quite gusty and quite fresh on those North Sea coasts perhaps, but even here the winds will ease down. Sunny spells on Saturday for Scotland, parts of northern England. For many in the south and the west it will be a cloudy day, but not much in the way of rain, and still relatively mild with temperatures 11 to 13 or 14 Celsius with some brightness across parts of the south. Sunday also a largely dry day, again predominantly cloudy, but we could see some spells of sunshine in a few places. Goodbye.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very welcome back. It is just after 3:30 on this Thursday afternoon. It is November 11th, of course, Remembrance Day, and we've been marking the occasion throughout the day here on GB News, including that silence at 11 a.m. But earlier, our Welsh reporter, Lily Hewitson, caught up with the Welsh First Minister, Mark Drayford, and he gave us his thoughts about this important day before he boarded that train from Cardiff to London to mark Remembrance Day here in the capital.
There'll be a train leaving Cardiff at about 8:30 this morning, going to London. It will arrive in London just about at the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month. And that is, the symbol of Remembrance Day. So wreaths will be put onto the train representing organisations in Wales who have a particular responsibility for marking the sacrifice of people in 2 world wars, and that's what I'll be here to do as well.
Lovely. And why is it important for us to continue to wear the poppy? It's something we've been doing for 100 years now. I spent a lot of time with the Royal British Legion this week, and I couldn't quite believe it, 100 years of wearing this flower.
Absolutely. 100 years since the Royal British Legion was formed. And although at the end of every war people say this must never happen again and we'll make sure that people's sacrifices are recognised in that way, the truth is the conflicts go on across the world. We're marking next year 40 years since the Falklands War, 30 years since the Gulf War, 20 years since 9/11. So the poppy goes on being a symbol, not things that happened a very long time ago, that very few people today can remember, but things that have happened in our own lifetimes, and which people I know are very keen to go on recognising and remembering.
And I think over the last year or so, something we've been more aware of is what our armed forces do at home, not just on the battlefield. Recently we've had them helping out the Welsh Ambulance Service. Do you think people are as aware of what they do for us here at home as well as abroad?
Oh, I think people are more aware of it, as you say. There's been a huge amount of help from the armed services here in Wales during the pandemic. Many people going for their vaccination will have found themselves being vaccinated by young people who serve in the RAF, for example, as well as all the help we've had with ambulances and planning and logistics and so on. It's been a huge effort which we are immensely grateful for, and I do think it has reminded people of all the things the armed services do day in, day out, as well as at times of conflict.
And something that I've been asking a lot of people that I've been interviewing this week is, during that 2 minutes when we have that period of reflection, it's quite a personal moment, I think. What do you personally think about during those 2 minutes?
I generally think of my 2 grandfathers, who were both combatants in the First World War. One of them in the Pembrokeshire Yeomanry, my other grandfather, who went at the age of 17, speaking, I imagine, very few words of English, from deepest rural Carmarthenshire to London, to be part of the very beginning of the Air Force. And I think of them every Armistice Day.
There you go, that's Mark Dreyford, the Welsh First Minister, talking about Remembrance Day, of course, November 11th. OK, you're watching GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be live in Glasgow at COP and also back down with Mark White in Dover. But first, with the time just after 3:30, here's the news headlines this hour.
Good afternoon. These are your latest GB News headlines this hour. The Duchess of Cornwall has joined millions of people observing 2 minutes silence for Armistice Day. On the 11th hour of the 11th day, on the 11th month, people across the UK paused to honour those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Also in the headlines today, Border Force officers have intercepted at least 25 migrant boats attempting to cross the Channel today. Up to 50 people were on board each vessel. It's been reported that 4 small boats have also made it to shore, landing on beaches in Deal in Kent. A funeral's been held for Northern Ireland veteran Dennis Hutchings. Hundreds of mourners lined a road in Plymouth, applauding, cheering and saluting as the coffin arrived at the church, escorted by bikers. The 80-year-old died from COVID last month. He was awaiting trial over a shooting in County Tyrone during the Troubles in 1974. The NHS is on its knees and buckling under pressure. Those are the words of industry analysts as waiting lists in England reach a record high. Data from NHS England shows 5.8 million people were on waiting lists at the end of September, the highest number since records began. And 11 retailers are recalling batches of cold and flu capsules because of a mistake on the packaging. Perigio tablets overstated the safe maximum daily dose for children. The medicines regulator says the risk to consumers is low. And sports, Steven Gerrard says Aston Villa's ambitious plans influenced his decision to become the club's new head coach. Gerrard replaces Dean Smith, who was sacked by Villa on Sunday. That's all from me. I'm back at 4 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very welcome back to GB News and the briefing. We're going to focus now on housing, because it is housing that is the focus of COP26 in Glasgow today. And there are around 28.5 million in the UK, that's of homes, and 80% of those will be around in 2050 when the UK aims to hit that net zero target. But our buildings are some of the least energy efficient in Europe, perhaps unsurprising given the fact that 36 were built before 1944 and only 17% were built after 1990. Consequently, our homes emit around 18% of UK emissions on a par with cars. So what will make them green? How do we get there with the cost that is involved? And will a focus on green issues actually help tackle the housing crisis? We'll be doing that in a second, but first, Lucy Powell, Labour's Shadow Housing Secretary, spoke to GB News earlier about what she wants to see when it comes to housing and trying to reach those green standards.
Well, what they're not doing is requiring that all new homes that are being built to the highest emission standards, and that they've got the sustainable home heating, for example, heat pumps or hydrogen heating or other systems. And what that means is that in a few years' time, the new homes that are being built today are going to be subject to high costs of what we call retrofit, of having to go back and add these measures into those new homes. There's a huge job of work, an absolutely huge job of work to do with our existing housing stock. We've got some of the most poorly insulated, least energy efficient homes in Europe in this country. And that is a huge job. It accounts for nearly 20% of our emissions in this country. So we're talking about COP26 today. How we heat and keep our homes warm is such a big issue in that agenda. So you might not remember, but we announced at our conference, at Labour Party conference, a really ambitious plan for retrofitting our homes, where those on low and modest incomes could get grants to retrofit their homes. So whether that's double glazing, roof insulation, or transitioning their home heating systems, people would get grants to do that. And those who could afford to pay could get loans to do that as well. So it's going to be a massive task. We need a national mission to really make all of our homes warmer for the long term, but it will also save people money as well, because bills will be reduced as a consequence.
That's Labour's Lisa Powell speaking a little bit earlier to GB News. Well, as I say, it is the main focus of what is being discussed in COP26 today in Glasgow. Let's go live to Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, who has been covering this conference, which into the penultimate day tomorrow, Tom. I'm sure you're relieved as much as everyone is. So penultimate day today. Just tell us about housing and why they're focusing on that, particularly today in Glasgow.
Yes, housing is a bit of a missing piece of the puzzle. So much of this has been about energy generation, has been about transport, but actually how we live really matters. And it can be something that really is effective in terms of changing the way that we consume carbon in a market-friendly way. I'm delighted to be joined now by Nico Votelerich, who's from the National Federation of Builders, and can talk to us a little bit more about how important housing is to that net zero puzzle.
Yeah, it's integral really. Not only will it improve a lot of the market solutions and deliver us better outcomes and inspire a new generation of renewable energy, but it makes places more connected, and that connectivity and better placemaking is absolutely integral to ensure that we have less car-obsessed cities and towns, more jobs on our doorsteps, better connectivity across the whole of the UK, and I guess really just progressing a conversation that's been had for quite some time but hasn't got enough attention.
And one of the problems here, I suppose, is that currently many people who live in homes that they potentially think would rather be closer inside cities, but are actually a little bit further away because of this housing crisis, means they have to use their cars, they have to use these more carbon-intensive places to get around, and that's worse for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we've got a few issues on that element, really, because if we want to build places and we want jobs and houses in the same area, then we're going to have to use more land, and there's a big land use conversation to be had. And whether it's out in the more rural communities or the less connected cities and regions, or whether it's within cities themselves, how do you increase density? We really need to design better places so we have balconies, outside spaces, roof terraces, better places to live within those buildings themselves. So design is absolutely key. But then integrating transport system that works. A lot of people are anti-car. Well, I understand that sentiment, but actually cars are integral to communities. They're not just a bad thing. So how do we ensure that we have more livable places that aren't car dependent? That means that we will use fewer cars naturally. And when you move outside of the cities, those rural communities, we need to connect regions up, and that could be, I live in Brighton now. We can't just be a commuter city for London. We've got to be a place that encourages from Dover to Portsmouth, a big region, we're a coastal region. We need to get back to that reality and enable jobs and housing and opportunities across the whole area, so that people don't feel as though they just have to travel a long distance just to get to work.
And so much of this conversation can feel like it's always about London, or in the wider sense, London and the South East. But actually, that phrase, London and the South East, ignores so many of those coastal communities, as you talk about, so many of those areas that have just become commuter towns that actually could be places in their own right. How do we solve that puzzle?
I think we just have to be honest about what the planning process is doing. I actually really appreciated what government did with the recent planning reforms, because it wasn't very London-based. Doing this job for 7 years now, you know that every policy that comes out is focused on a London concern. And these planning reforms looked a bit wider than that. Unfortunately, they've rolled back a little bit, and I think that a better conversation, a better discussion about how we deliver better places will improve that planning reform debate. Let's have that before we scrap the whole scheme, because actually it was quite innovative, and it meant that we were going to build in every region, and every region was going to take its share. And if you're desperate for homes, as you are in the southeast, and not so desperate in the northeast and northwest, because actually those places are delivering above and beyond their minimum demand, you can deliver a better place. And that word place is vital. And you mentioned there London and the southeast. The southeast is not London. The southeast is the southeast, just like the southwest is the southwest. And I feel a little bit sorry for the southwest, because it gets dumped almost into this southern conversation, where if you want to travel, down to Cornwall or to those regions, Penzance, good God, is it a nightmare to get all the way down there? And that's because it's fairly disconnected. And that's exactly the same if you want to go to Dover, if you want to go to Hastings, if you want to go to Eastbourne. It's not that easy. If you want to travel along the route from going through Kent, yes, but what about your Tunbridge Wells? What about your West Sussex? What about your Hampshire? All those areas are fairly disconnected. They're a region.
Yeah. It's so interesting how this conversation is not just about London. It's not actually just about the climate either. It all ties together. It's a really fascinating part of what COP26 is talking about today. Well, thank you for joining us, and back to you, Darren, after what is actually one of those less discussed issues here.
Yeah, indeed, and I'm sure you'll be delighted, Tom, that I'm joining you tomorrow. I'll be back up in Glasgow. We're presenting a special programme, aren't we, 2 to 3, as those negotiations enter the last day. But let's stick with housing, and we'll go to Morgan Shandamar, who is from the Adam Smith Institute and joins me live now. Just listening to that about this kind of idea of trying to build more homes but make them more sustainable when it comes to trying to reach those green targets, particularly net zero by 2050. Can it be done?
Well, this is something that Rico alluded to with the issues with our planning system. It's incredibly hard to build new homes. And you mentioned something like 17% of homes have been built past 1990. So we do have a very old housing stock, and we need to supplement that with new homes. One of the issues right now is it really is a seller's market. You can offer up whatever kind of home you want, and someone's probably going to take it because of such the dire shortage that we have. So there's no real incentive to offer these kind of green homes that are more attractive to consumers as people become more eco-conscious. So we really need to look at offering more homes of different types. This includes new builds, apartment blocks. I live in a high-rise apartment, and it's incredibly well insulated. It's brand new, and I'm very fortunate to be in that place. So we need to make sure that we can create more buildings like that to give more people opportunities to live in energy efficient homes while still focusing on our older stock.
Yeah, and I certainly live in completely the opposite, which is a very old building that's got a single glazed window and has got very little installation at all. In saying that, there is this trend, isn't there, though, where people, and we've seen this actually from estate agents, are now looking for actually greener homes. So in some ways, might that push the market in the kind of good old capitalist way of demand?
Absolutely. That's what you need to hope for, is you need to hope that as people become more eco-conscious, which we're clearly seeing, they will ask more of their homes and the places that they're living. Unfortunately, so many of us are struggling to find places to live at all that are within budget, near to your job, or a place where you want to live. So there isn't much choice out there for consumers. If it becomes easier to build and more affordable to build because we fix the issues in our planning system and we fix all the things that we need to in terms of opening up land and all of these things to make it easier to build homes, they will become more affordable, there will be more options, and we will be able to ask for better from the developers and ask for more as consumers.
OK, Morgan, thank you very much indeed. Morgan Shundamar there from the Adam Smith Institute on Housing. Let's move back to one of our top stories today. We were hearing from Mark White, of course, the Home Affairs editor, live from Dover a little bit earlier, that this may be a record-breaking day, for migrants crossing the English Channel. He has been there covering this story for the last couple of weeks, and here's a sense of what has happened in the last couple of days with migrants crossing that channel.
Ploughing through the waves along the Kent coast, Dover lifeboat off to yet another call-out. To say they've been busy of late doesn't begin to describe the workload these volunteers are having to shoulder, as they're called on increasingly to respond to the growing small boat crisis in the Channel. And as we head towards winter, there is no end in sight to a problem that the Home Secretary says she's determined to tackle, but in reality seems powerless to make any meaningful impact on. It was the promise of relatively calm conditions in the Channel this week that brought dozens of small boats back out onto the water. I say relatively calm, for in truth, there are never really ideal conditions on a stretch of water where the winds can whip up in an instant, where the tides are always fast flowing, and where the wakes from the many vessels in this busy shipping lane only add to the obstacles faced by these small boats. On Wednesday, more than 20 of them were intercepted in British waters. Around 10 incidents were reported early morning. The boat's occupants brought back to shore. Here they're on the Border Force cutter Seeker. 5 Border Force vessels were responding to calls throughout the morning. But by lunchtime, there were more small boat sightings than they could possibly manage, at least a dozen in the space of a few hours. And so much of the burden falls on the lifeboats, often called out as many of the migrants are told by the people traffickers to dial 999 and say they're in trouble. The RNLI then have no choice but to respond. But it is putting intense pressure on this volunteer service, where those responding have to leave their main job of work for hours on end, day after day. It's clearly unsustainable. Border Force is purchasing a fleet of new vessels, but they won't be on the water for several months yet. The construction of this purpose-built processing centre in Dover tells you where the Home Office is at, despite the tough talk. We are already approaching triple the number of migrants who've crossed this year compared to the whole of last year. And with thousands gathering in Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne and elsewhere along the northwest French coast, that number is only set to increase. The numbers painted on the boats in Dover Harbour are well over 800, but there are many more. On the busier days, they're not even towed back into port. They're left to drift in the Channel, eventually washing up on local beaches. Mark White, GB News.
Mark will be with us throughout the afternoon here on GB News with the latest from Dover. Just a reflection of some of your views on the top stories that we've been covering today. David's written in about Remembrance Day, saying veterans should get better support than they do. Paddy says that if soldiers got drunk, they would be in big trouble and that MPs should be suspended. Of course, that's that story about what happened on the trip to Gibraltar. And Stephen thinks that the channel crossings are getting out of hand. Something has to be done. That's it from me for today. We're back tomorrow live from Glasgow. Alex is up next with the Alex Agenda. Don't miss that. But first, let's get the weather from the Met Office. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello again. After a fairly calm day of weather today, I think it's going to get lively overnight. A gusty, blustery day on Friday, with most places seeing a fair few showers. There will be some spots that see some sunny spells, but here's the reason why things are getting lively. A deep area of low pressure is heading our way. Not quite here yet, certainly across much of England, Wales and Scotland, but rain is pushing into western Scotland and already into parts of Northern Ireland. That rain will spread more widely into northwest England, West Wales through the night. Much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England will stay dry, but everywhere the breeze will pick up. That'll keep the temperatures up. Early on, we could drop down to 7 or 8 Celsius across the east, but by dawn, most towns and cities will be up at double digits. So not a cold start to Friday, but for some a fairly grim start. Rain across Northern Ireland, quite heavy bursts of rain crossing through Scotland as well, and fairly damp over parts of northwest England and North Wales. So then we'll see showers developing almost anywhere through the day, staying particularly dull and damp through central Scotland and across the Northern Isles too. Won't see too many showers across East Anglia and the southeast, and a bit of brightness here. Could see highs of 15 Celsius, but don't forget it will be quite blustery, so feeling cooler perhaps than those temperatures would suggest. Through the course of Friday evening, the rain actually tends to fizzle out, so many places become dry, and slowly the breeze will start to ease also. So Saturday's a calmer day, still quite gusty and quite fresh on those North Sea coasts perhaps, but even here the winds will ease down. Sunny spells on Saturday for Scotland, parts of northern England. For many in the south and the west it will be a cloudy day, but not much in the way of rain and still relatively mild, with temperatures 11 to 13 or 14 Celsius with some brightness across parts of the south. Sunday also a largely dry day, again predominantly cloudy, but we could see some spells of sunshine in a few places. Goodbye.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.